guys, and welcome back to another video on my channel. Today's video is going to be another video where I talk about horror movies that are based on true life events. Or I guess I talk about the events that inspired these movies. I don't really talk too much about the movies. But this video I really wanted to do on The Fourth Kind, the movie. And if you've seen that movie, you know that they really portray it as being based on these true life events, and that the clips that are in the movie are real and all of this crazy stuff. And I never dove too deeply into it. I never really looked it up on my own terms or anything like that until I was researching it for today's video. And that is when I found out that that movie is not based on true life events, despite what you are told at the beginning and the end of the movie. So today's video will not be about that movie, but I just thought that was a little bit interesting. But with that all being said, let's get right into today's case. Just quickly before we get into this case, I do just want to mention that this case heavily talks about sexual assault, and so if that is something that you are not comfortable hearing about, please do not watch this video and go check out a different video on my channel. Thank you, and with that all being said, let's get started with this video. Today we are going to be talking about the case of Doris Bither, which is the case that inspired the movie The Entity. Now, Doris was a full-grown woman at this point, but her life had definitely not been without struggle. She had been in more than one abusive relationship. She had at one point turned to drugs, but at this point in her life that we are now going to be talking about, she was trying to change that all up, and she was doing a very good job of it and just trying to start out a new and happy life for her and her 4 children. She had 3 sons aging 10, 13, and 16, and her youngest child was a daughter who was 6 years old. Doris had just started renting a house for her and her children to live in, and it was located on Braddock Drive in Culver City, California. Moving into this house went seemingly normal. There was a few things that kind of stood out of the ordinary to Doris and her children, but nothing really struck them as too strange. It was just very simple things that could be very easily explained away. That was until one day when an unknown Hispanic woman came banging on the home's front door. When Doris opened the door, this is when this woman went on a frantic rant about how she had previously lived in this house and how the home was evil. And after giving that frantic statement to Doris, the woman then left without any more explanation to what she was claiming, and she never returned back to the house, leaving Doris with a very unsettled feeling in her gut. But Doris was a very busy woman. She was the single mother of 4. She had to run the household and keep up with the household completely on her own without getting help from pretty much anybody. So she just had a lot to do and was always very busy. So she didn't have too much time to kind of feed into what that woman had said to her, and she tried to just brush it out of her mind and not think about it again. But soon after this woman visited this home, that is when Doris would start to experience the horrors of this house for her very self. And to be honest with you, this is probably one of the most horrific and terrifying paranormal cases that I have researched up to this point. Again, there were a few things that happened within the home that Doris and her children could just explain away. Cracks in the house that could be explained by the wind and things along those lines, but nothing too horrifying up until this point. But when the spirits in this home decided to start tormenting the family, they did not hold back or spare them at all, coming strong into this case just absolutely horrifying. Again, the terrors of this home started to happen shortly after Doris was visited by that Hispanic woman, and the first time that she had ever experienced something like this, it started off just absolutely horrifying, and you could not explain it away. So Doris had put her children to bed. They were all in their rooms getting ready to go to sleep, if not already sleeping, and Doris was in her bedroom by herself when she claimed that 2 male entities came into the room, and one held her down while the other one violently raped her. Sadly, this rape was not an isolated incident, and this would happen to Doris on a regular basis. And this wasn't only bothering her, but it was really starting to get to the children, and it was really traumatizing them, as you can imagine. But Brian in particular, who was her 13-year-old son, his bedroom was located directly next to his mother's, and the walls in the home were very, very thin, and he claimed that he could often hear these attacks, but he was just too horrified to do anything, and he didn't know what he could do because these entities were invisible. They were ghosts, so what could he have possibly done? The other children also heard the attacks, but not as closely, I guess, as Brian had. And a lot of people who were in constant contact with Doris, as well as her children, often talked about how Doris's legs and inner thighs were always bruised, and she had cuts that would kind of line up with that of a rape victim. In 1974, with not knowing what else to do, Doris decided to reach out to a parapsychologist by the name of Dr. Barry Taff and his partner, Carrie Goner. When Doris reached out to them, she had reported to them that she had been repeatedly raped by 3 entities that were haunting her home. After meeting with Doris, however, Dr. Taff did not think that she was telling the full truth. He didn't think that she was just a straight up liar, but he thought that her claims were a little bit outlandish and that they were possibly the claims of a very mentally unstable woman. The reason for this is because I believe the first time that Doris had met Dr. Taff as well as Carrie, they were in a bookstore, and she kind of gave him the rundown of what was going on in her home, and then she gave him her contact information and asked him to reach out to her and come and visit her home to see what was going on. And that is what Dr. Taff did, and one day he did end up visiting Doris's home. The reason for that is when Dr. Barry Taff did decide to pay a visit to Doris's home, he found that the home firstly was just an absolute complete disaster. And I don't mean like your average home where there's lots of kids running around and the mom doesn't have time to do the upkeeping and it's just a mess. The home was allegedly just completely falling apart. So bad that it had actually been condemned twice. On top of that, just adding to the situation, Doris visibly did not have a great relationship with her 2 oldest sons. They spoke very aggressively back and forth to each other. Doris spoke aggressively to the children spoke aggressively to her, and the relationship just very obviously was not great. On top of that, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Doris did not have a great life before moving to this area. She had been in abusive relationships, she had abused drugs, and so because of all of this put together, Dr. Barry Taff just thought that she was having a mental break. And so before leaving the home, he did direct her to an institute that could kind of help her if that was the case before he left. After leaving the home, Barry thought that this would be the last time that he would ever hear from Doris, but that was not the case. 2 weeks after his first visit to the home, he received another phone call from Doris claiming that this time she had witnesses who would tell him that they knew that this was happening to Doris, just confirming that her story was real and that this wasn't all made up by a very mentally unstable woman. And so the doctor decided that maybe this was worth reconsidering, and so he decided to set aside his first assumptions from what he had seen within the home and revisit the home and give Doris a second chance. After returning to the home a second time, this is when they were shocked to find that not only had Doris's children witnessed the horrific attacks, but so had neighbors as well as some of Doris's friends. Now, because of this and all of the confirming information that was coming from neighbors and the kids and all of these people, that is when Barry Taff and his partner Carrie decided to open an investigation into this case. After really sitting down and talking to the children is when Dr. Barry Taff was really convinced. The children told him about an entity that stalked the home who they had nicknamed Mr. Who's It. Now this was the strongest entity that was in the house, and it was the one that was really causing all of the chaos. Not only did the children's story line up with each other's, there was no thing to incline that they were telling lies or making any of this up, as all of their stories were the same. But the doctor said that a lot of the stories that the children were telling also lined up with a lot of other paranormal experiences with children. After spending more time on this case and giving Doris a little bit more attention, that is when they started to really look into her rape claims. And they started to really examine her body after she claimed that these rapes had happened and whatnot. And that is when they noticed that there was actual signs on Doris's body as if she had been raped and sexually assaulted, just confirming that her story was in fact true. Doris's attacks did remain to be the worst and the most violent, but as time went on, these entities started to attack the kids as well. Not in a sexual manner like they had been targeting Doris, but the children would be attacked and be left with scratch and bite marks and just bruises everywhere, as if these spirits were almost beating them up. Over time, Doris's attacks just began to grow more and more severe, and the children didn't know what to do. They had no other option except to sit in a corner and try and cover their ears while their mother was assaulted and attacked by an invisible spirit. Something strange to keep in mind here that I thought was particularly interesting while I was researching this case is that one of Doris's older sons claimed that there was 4 entities stalking the home and that the 4 entities would torment all of them. Doris, the children, everybody. But Doris herself claims that there was only 3 entities who stalked the home. However, her son, who said that there was 4, was absolutely adamant that there was in fact 4 entities in the home. And that just kind of got my mind going. Could there have possibly been a 4th entity that was in the home who took a particular interest in the children and just kind of left Doris alone? I don't know why that just really sparked my interest and was something that I really wanted to mention in the video. The weird thing about this particular case that is different from any other paranormal case that I've covered on my channel is that there was really no end to this haunting and these attacks. And even today, there is no closure in this case. After all of this trauma and all of these horrible things kept happening, Doris packed up her family and moved several times to multiple locations. And although they said that this did help the attacks kind of calm down a bit and that they weren't as severe as they had been at the first locations, these attacks continued to happen. Not as frequently, again, and not as violently, but they did continue. Doris went through the rest of her life claiming that these entities followed her and they continued to assault her on a regular basis, although it wasn't as frequent and again as violent as it previously had been. Doris actually claimed on one occasion that she had been impregnated by one of these entities. And then after that, she pretty much just vanished off the face of the earth as far as the public eye goes until 1995 when she passed away due to cardiac arrest. So if you have seen the movie The Entity, then you probably see the similarities between this case and that movie, as again, that movie was based on the real life events of Doris Bither and her family. This movie, I believe, was released in 1982, and it follows around a woman and is based in LA, and the main character's name is Carol, and she is the single mother of 4 children who she is struggling to take care of when she starts to be violently raped on a regular basis by entities within her home. She seeks refuge with her friends and her neighbors, and honestly, this movie just really imitates the exact case that we just talked about. This movie is very good and very interesting, and I highly recommend watching it if you're into horror movies. But again, this case really talks about sexual assault and things like that, so obviously, if that is something that bothers you, don't watch that movie. But guys, that brings us to the end of this video. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!